At first glance, it may seem ordinary enough. A simple handbag symbol appearing in the carving of an ancient culture.
Austin Henry Layard dug into the sands of Mesopotamia and found a palace that had been lost for centuries. The walls were lined with giants. These stone figures were the Apkallu, the wise sages of the ancient world. But every single one of them was clutching a rigid square bag with a heavy handle.
What are these handbags? And why are they depicted again and again in cultures separated by centuries and thousands of miles?
This object has baffled experts for over a century. It defies the official timeline of human invention. It appears in the hands of gods who brought science and law to primitive man. The bag wasn't just a symbol, it was a toolbox. And the tools inside change everything we know about our past. The king's secret weapon. The story begins in the dust of modern-day Iraq, the cradle of what we call civilization. In the mid-19th century, an English archaeologist named Austin Henry Layard was digging in the desert sands. He was looking for the lost city of Nimrud. What he found was the royal palace of Ashurnasirpal II. This king was a conqueror who ruled 3,000 years ago, and his palace was a statement of absolute dominance. The walls were lined with massive slabs of alabaster, standing over 9 feet tall. But as Layard brushed away the dirt, he realized the king wasn't the most important thing on the wall. Towering over the human figures were strange, muscular beings. These were the Apkallu. In Mesopotamian legend, these were the 7 sages, semi-divine beings who lived before the Great Flood. They were powerful, frightening, and wise. Some had the heads of eagles, others looked like men, but all of them had wings. According to the ancient texts, these beings were responsible for teaching humanity everything that matters. They taught us how to write, how to build temples, and how to create laws. But here is the catch. When you look closely at these 7-foot-tall carvings, your eyes are drawn to their hands. In one hand, they hold a pine cone. In the other, they are gripping a heavy, rigid object that looks exactly like a modern handbag. It has a distinct semicircular handle, a flat base, and a boxy shape. It does not look like a soft sack or a pouch. It looks like a piece of manufactured equipment. For over 100 years, mainstream historians have looked at this and shrugged. They came up with a very safe, very boring explanation. They call it a bandoo. They say it is just a bucket. According to the textbooks, the cone was a sponge and the bucket held holy water or pollen. The sages were simply sprinkling the king or the sacred tree to purify them. It was a farming ritual. Just a bucket of water to ensure a good harvest. And to be fair, that sounds logical for a society that depended on farming, but it is not that simple though. If this was just a water bucket, why is it held with such tension? Why is the shape so specific and rigid? And why is it associated with Oan? Oannes was the leader of these sages. The ancient writer Berossus described him as a fish man who rose from the Persian Gulf every morning. He had a human voice and human feet but wore the body of a fish. He wasn't a farmer, he was a scientist. He taught men letters, sciences, and arts of all kinds. He taught them geometry. So here is the deal. You do not need a water bucket to teach geometry. You do not need a bag of pollen to teach the laws of physics. The bucket explanation is a desperate attempt to make a high-tech anomaly fit into a low-tech timeline. The bag wasn't a prop for a ritual, it was the source of their power. It was the container for the civilization they were handing over. The ancient texts are clear that these beings brought me, a Sumerian concept that translates to the functions of civilization or divine decrees. These were like software programs for society. The bag likely held the tools or the data necessary to implement these programs. The idea that the most advanced beings in their mythology were walking around with a simple water pail starts to feel ridiculous when you look at the precision of the carvings. They were protecting this object. They were displaying it as a badge of office. It was the most important thing they carried. And the mystery gets deeper because this wasn't just a local fashion trend in Iraq. If it was just an Assyrian bucket, we would only find it in Assyria. But we don't. This impossible object was about to show up where it absolutely shouldn't be. The global fingerprint of the gods. Everyone is obsessed with the idea that cultures in the ancient world were isolated. We are taught that people in Turkey, people in Mexico, and people in Iraq had zero contact with each other. They were separated by giant oceans and thousands of years. But the handbag proves that is a lie. The first crack in the official story appeared at a site called Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. If you do not know about this place, it changes everything. This is the oldest temple on Earth. It is made of massive limestone pillars arranged in circles. Some of these T-shaped pillars weigh 50 tons, and the carbon dating on this site is terrifying to mainstream historians. It is over 12,000 years old. That is 7,000 years older than the pyramids. It was built at the end of the last ice age by people who were supposedly primitive hunter-gatherers. These were people who shouldn't have known how to cut stone, let alone organize a massive construction project. Yet there it is. And get this, on Pillar 43, carved into the limestone, are 3 distinct handbags. They are right there at the top of the pillar. They have the same semicircular handle, the same boxy shape, the same rigid structure. This means the symbol of the handbag existed thousands of years before the Assyrians ever carved it. It predates writing. It predates the wheel. It predates the civilization of Sumer itself. So, how did a bunch of Ice Age hunters in Turkey have the exact same specific symbol as the future kings of Iraq? But the mystery doesn't stop at the borders of the Middle East. It jumps across the Atlantic Ocean. Let's go to Mexico. The Olmecs are known as the mother culture of Mesoamerica. They are famous for those giant stone heads that weigh tons. At a site called La Venta, there's a stone monument known as Stela 19. It shows a figure, possibly a priest or a god, sitting inside the coils of a serpent. This is the feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl. And in his hand, he is holding the bag. It is undeniable. He is clutching a small, handle-topped square container. Just like once in Iraq, Quetzalcoatl was a civilizer god. He arrived from the sea. He was tall, light-skinned, and bearded, which was unusual for the region. He taught the people astronomy, math, and agriculture, and he carried the exact same device. What are the odds? Seriously, think about it. The official story says the Olmecs and the Assyrians had absolutely no way of speaking to each other. Yet they both decided to depict their most important gods holding the exact same purse. And that is putting it lightly. It keeps going. In New Zealand, the Maori people have a legend about their ancestor, Tane. He climbed to the highest heavens to retrieve the 3 baskets of knowledge. These baskets contain the stories of creation, the knowledge of magic, and the knowledge of life. He brought them down to earth to teach humanity. Again, we have a divine being bringing knowledge inside a specific container. We even see it in the art of the Toltecs in Mexico, held by the massive Atlantean warrior statues. We see similar shapes in the hieroglyphs of Egypt. The Ankh, the symbol of life, looks suspiciously like a stylized version of this handbag, a loop handle on top of a cross or box. So, here is the deal. We have a symbol that defies time and space. It appears at the very beginning of the Holocene period in Turkey. It appears in the first civilization in Iraq. It appears in the jungles of Mexico. In every single case, it is linked to a god or teacher who brings high-level information to a primitive people. Mainstream archaeology calls this convergent evolution. They say that because everyone needs to carry water, everyone just drew buckets the same way. But a bucket doesn't look like that. A soft basket doesn't look like that. This is a specific design. It looks like a battery. It looks like a transponder. It looks like a piece of technology that was standard issue for these visitors. The consistency is the smoking gun. If you were a detective and you found the exact same weapon at 3 different crime scenes on 3 different continents, you wouldn't say it was a coincidence. Or in this case, the same teacher. This forces us to ask the question that scares the historians. If the bag isn't a bucket, what is it? The contents of the bag would unlock powers that seem like magic. The Seed Bank of the Gods. The title of this video promised an explanation of what was inside, and this is where we have to leave the pollen theory in the dust. When you look at what these gods actually achieved, the contents of the bag become clear. It wasn't magic. It was technology that we are only just beginning to understand. Theory 1 is that the bag was a portable power source, a battery. Look at the megalithic structures of the ancient world, the 50-ton blocks at Göbekli Tepe, the granite stones in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid, the impossible walls of Sacsayhuaman in Peru. We still cannot replicate this masonry today, We cannot move stones that heavy through mountains without massive cranes and fossil fuels. Yet the ancients did it with hammers and chisels? Yeah, right. What if the handbag was a high-density energy storage device? A cold fusion battery or a zero-point energy module? This energy could power tools that use sound frequency to cut stone like butter. It could power devices that neutralized gravity, allowing the priests to float massive blocks into place. This explains why the gods are always holding it. Without the battery, the tech doesn't work. The civilization stops. But there is a more biological theory. The genetic toolkit. In the Assyrian carvings, the Apkallu are often shown pointing the pine cone at the back of the king's head. The pine cone is the delivery system, and the bag is the reservoir. Mainstream science admits that humans took a massive great leap forward in cognitive ability around 50,000 years ago. Our brains suddenly got better. We started making art, music, and language. What if that wasn't evolution? What if it was an upgrade? The bag contained the viral vectors or the DNA sequences needed to rewrite the human genome. The gods were genetic engineers. They were literally seeding intelligence into the population. They were modifying us to be able to understand the math and writing they were about to teach us. And this connects to the wildest theory of all, the pineal gland. The pine cone held in the other hand is a perfect replica of the human pineal gland. This is a tiny organ in the center of our brain. The ancients called it the third eye. The Vatican even has a massive bronze statue of a pine cone in their central courtyard. They know it matters. Basically, the theory is that the bag was a consciousness-altering device. It emitted a frequency or a substance that unlocked the full potential of the human pineal gland. It allowed humans to perceive higher dimensions, to understand complex abstract concepts, and to communicate telepathically. The knowledge wasn't a book inside the bag. The bag was a machine that turned on the receiver in our brains. This would explain why the knowledge appeared so suddenly. It wasn't taught in a classroom over centuries. It was a download. What most people don't realize is that these bags might also be reality projectors. In quantum physics, we are learning that reality is defined by the observer. What if the Apkallu were maintaining the stability of our physical realm? The bag contained the me, the divine decrees, the source code of physical laws. They were the system administrators of our reality, walking around with their laptops, making sure the simulation didn't crash. The fact that this object disappeared from history suggests it was either used up or hidden. The batteries died. The genetic project was finished, or the church and the secret societies gathered them all up. If you walk into a museum today, like the Brooklyn Museum, you can see these ritual buckets sitting on shelves. They are right there. But nobody is checking them for radiation. Nobody is checking them for nanotechnology. We are letting the greatest discovery in history gather dust because we are too afraid to admit that our ancestors had better tech than we do. So, was the handbag a battery, a DNA kit, or a survival pack from a lost human age? The evidence is carved in stone, but the truth is still locked away. What do you think would happen if we opened one today? Like, subscribe, and let me know below.